Hi guys, so I thought we'd do a quick shooting vid of the Rap68 shotgun before we get into the breakdown. So let's start off with loading paint. So when it comes to loading paint, very tedious of a task. You can only do about 3 balls at a time. So you throw 2 in there like that. You have to have 1 basically almost in the chamber to keep the balls leveled, and then you push them in. If you notice, there's a ball release right there. This little pin, here, I'll push it. See that? If you push that while you're loading, you're going to launch all your balls all over the place, and that's not a good thing. But let's get to the shooting. Right now I'm using my gun cam. It has a 25mm zoom lens, and let's see how she shoots. And that's not that bad of a marker. Incredibly accurate and really fun to shoot. Hey guys, so today we're doing the breakdown on the Rap68 shotgun, which is this right here. Taking this thing apart isn't actually that bad. We're going to take it completely apart today. So you're going to be needing a wrench, 2 Allen keys, and a Phillips head. If you have the Ram68 shotgun, then you're going to need a punch, and I'll explain that later. But first, let's start off with the basics. So for the first disassembly, you want to just make sure to take off your 12-gram adapter, or if you have a tank, just take that off. Now that's out of your way. Now we make our way to the loading cap, which would be right here. But I already cut that off. I cut that off a long time ago, so now I just have a grommet that sits in there just like that. So the loading cap would typically look like this. It would thread on really. It would be really easy to take off, and I'm sure you've taken it off before in the past. So once you take that off, you would take off your iron sight. Let's get that iron sight off. It comes off with just a little hand tighten lever, and you just slide it off like that. And that comes off just like that. If you look inside there, there's a groove. I don't know if you can tell, but if you see that groove right there, that it has a bump that comes up. You can see if I can point. There you go. You can see it. So that bump there goes up. It goes against the gun itself, and it locks itself in place. It's kind of like it's like a clamp almost in a sorts, but not really a clamp. But once that's out of your way, you want to grab yourself an Allen key and take this screw out. Yeah, my shotgun typically doesn't normally look like this. Mine, it looks very different, but for sake of the video, I tried to restore it as much as I could. So, but anyways, once you get that screw out, just like that. Yeah, that screw's out of the way. You just de-thread your barrel. Now that your barrel's off, you want to take off your loading tube. Now that we got this off, finally, you want to check on your loading spring. So this loading spring here, it's very similar to 20-round mag springs from MagFed mags. So if you ever need to replace this, it's actually not that hard. But you want to keep in mind on the string. The string is just cloth. There is no metal in it, so it can rip. So just keep that in mind about this thing. But now that that's out of your way, the pump handle can now go free. You just lift up like that, and there we go. You have the spring inside that you really don't want to lose. If you lose it, it's no big deal. It's just you're going to have a sloppier pump handle. So the spring goes back on when you put it back on. It goes on like that, and just you want to make sure to put that back on It is a pain in the butt though, so just keep that in mind. Now for your bolt it's going to require an Allen key. Mine, I am using a I forgot if this is from a Sheridan or a Nelson. Well, it's from an old gun. It basically works as a bolt handle for me. It's really easy because I like how you don't need a tool; it just comes right off. Now that you got your bolt free, oh, we can send our bolt flying. But now that we took that off, if you look at the spring here, this is can be replaced by the Phantom kits. Their springs will work on this gun. So if you want a new spring, just get one of those. Then here's your bolt. This bolt, I forget which shotgun I got it from, whether it's from a Rap or a Ram or a Prime Guard, but they have a lip on the bolt that allows, if we can take this off, allows for a bolt tip. This is from Planet Eclipse. It fits perfectly onto this bolt and it works wonders. There's quite a bit of room before even the bolts touch, so it's very, very soft on paint. I love this thing. Now that that's out of your way, you want to now make your way towards removing 2 screws, which are right here, and there's another one on the other side too, same location too. We flip this around, take out this other screw. Now that that screw's out of your way, you can now take the shell off the shotgun. So you lift up and pull forward. There we go. Shell's completely off. Now we have the pump arm. If you look at the pump arm, when you put this pump arm back on, you want to make sure it's above this sucker here. If it goes over, it can go over it, and it can get like this, pretty much, where it won't engage. So you just want to make sure this sits on there, just like that. And a modification I do suggest doing is, if you have the similar setup, I know Prime Guards don't, but the Rap68 shotgun does. So you can do this by, softening it, rounding it up a little bit, and it will actually catch a lot better. Before it was actually just a block in a sense, and it'd be kind of rough, but this smoothens it out a little bit, and it does help. For some of you, you probably had a spring right here. That spring for me is gone. Well, the spring would go right here in this little groove, and will go under the shell or under the pump arm, and would hook up right here. But because of the way I have my shotgun set up, I don't have a need for that spring. That spring is useless for me, so I gave it to someone who needed it. But yeah, you would typically have a spring that would go under this shell, so when you take it out, you want to be careful on how you pull this, because you can actually damage your spring. But now we're down to the internals of this marker. So if you see the internals here, you got a few screws. Like this screw here is known for unscrewing itself, and it'll typically loosen and will cause all kinds of problems because there's a spring behind this. So just check on that. And then there's pins, like there's a pin in there, and then there's, I think that's the only pin you want to keep your eye on. Oh, there's actually this one here too. There's that pin. They can come out on their own. Now, if you look here, you want to keep an eye on the spring here. This spring is a sneaky little devil because it can come off on its own, and there's nothing holding it on there. So if this falls off, it will fall out through here, which is always open to the environment and to the field you're playing on, so you'll never find it if it falls off. But make sure that's always secured on there. And then you want to check on this screw and these screws here too. There's this screw and then this screw on this side that you want to check on, because if these get loose, what can give you trouble is it can give you a power tube farts pretty much. What will happen is when you have your power tube and you try inserting your bolt back in, your power tube will be out of line, so it won't want to go back in. It will just fight each other. And you don't want to force your power tube to line up either, because you can break this. This thing is very, very delicate. From what I've seen people who have their power tube snap in half. It's probably because they were forcing their bolt back in and straining the power tube and even bending it. And this is brass, so brass doesn't... I mean, brass, I'm told brass will bend easily, but I don't know. It's very soft metal. So now, we want to take... We're going to go further into this marker. Take this Phillips out. Phillips is out. You want to grab yourself an Allen key. Oh, wrong size. Oh, still the wrong size. I'm going to have to go in my handy dandy toolbox. Grab myself the right size. Nope. Yeah, let's grab the multi. Actually, you're the one I'm looking for. Yep. Alright. Okay. Now, we take this out. This is the only, well, it depends on whether it's been replaced or not, but it'll either be an Allen key or Phillips. Or, yeah, an Allen screw hole. And now you grab your Phillips here again. And you take out this screw. Now they're shaped differently from the body screws and the internal screws, as you can see. They're significantly different in size. This is the body screw and this is the internal screw. So this is the screw we just took out, and this is the one that was outside. So they're pretty hard to mix up, thankfully. I like how they did that. That's actually, I think that's a really nice feature. So now that we're taking this apart, you want to pull. Ooh, I guess I pulled a little too hard there. But yeah, you want to pull it off like that, and it'll slide off. The only reason mine came off so easily is because I've done it multiple times. I'm sure for you it's going to be probably 3 times harder. But yeah, here we go. Here's our valve here, and here's our power tube at the same time. This power tube is known for getting loose on its own, and it will wiggle. So when you check on this, you want to check on this particularly. Make sure this is tight on there. If it's not, and if this is wiggling, it's probably a likely chance that this is not tight all the way. Now, we're going to go even deeper into this thing. And we're going to take a look at the one issue, or the one O-ring this marker kind of really has. There is one other O-ring, which isn't the ASA, but this is the most common O-ring that goes out. The ASA O-ring, actually, there is no ASA O-ring. It's just the power tube. This gun has only one O-ring, not including the barrel. Look, yeah, the barrel, which has this supposedly has an O-ring here, but I took mine off a long time ago. But yes, this is the only O-ring this marker will have. So you grab your wrench. I don't suggest pliers, because pliers will chew this thing up, because this is brass. Sorry, I had to take that out of camera, but I pretty much had to put that like that and just rotate it out. So for me, it's really easy because I've done this before. For you, it's probably going to be more difficult because it's never been opened up. So it's probably going to be a little stiffer. So if you can see in here, I'm trying to get a good angle for you guys. There's our valve, and here's an O-ring, the one O-ring. I've already replaced this O-ring. You can use AC O-rings. They work just fine. And if you look, see our valve there. I'm told it's very similar to the Nelson's, or to Nelson valve, but this one I'm told is about 0.5 millimeters smaller, so you can't interchange parts. But yet, make sure to keep this looped, or mostly just keep that loop. And then our valve spring I don't have to take mine out because I've already taken mine out. But we can put that back on. So when it comes to the valve, this is typically what your valve would look like. There's your valve. Here's your valve spring. This is the spring you would want for paintball. Some markers, though, will come with this valve, which you would have your spring would go like that, and then you have the spacer that goes on there. And for this is the valve you would want if you were shooting home defense paintballs, like rubber balls or any of those nylon balls. This is the valve spring you would want for shooting that. But for paintball, this is what you would want because there's higher volume. So if you're taking your marker apart and you notice your valve is this one, or your valve spring is this, you're going to want to get one of these springs. Rap68 does still sell these valve springs, so you can pick one up brand new. And this valve spring here is more ideal for home defense, like I said earlier. But that was just a quick side note I wanted to mention. Oh, a little fun fact, though I'm sure you appreciate, or think it's kind of a bad thing, depending on how you take it. This is completely hollow. That's all hollow right there. There's nothing in there. You can see the screw where the grip would go into. But yeah, that is all that right there below the line where the air or CO2, whatever you're using, goes through. Yeah, all this is hollow. So if you wanted to, you could cut this and put something in if you wanted to, or even convert it to have a folding stock or whatever you would want. But yeah, so now that we got our power tube back on, just want to make sure this is tight. Yeah, definitely want to make sure this is tight. If it's not tight, then you will have trouble when you try airing it up. And then you have to go through this process all over again. So now that that's tight, a fun little fact about chrono. If you look here, you see two little holes in there. You grab a needle nose pliers and you twist in to increase or out to decrease. Yeah, that's for velocity. So that is a downside for sure. Having to take your tank off, or if you're using 12 grams like I do, having to waste a 12 gram to change your velocity and then use a new 12 gram, and then even if it's not there yet, that's still a very frustrating thing that can happen. But now, that's back on. We can go to the marker itself. And you can see there's the trigger assembly. Now, if you wanted to take the trigger assembly off, you would need a punch and a hammer. I don't have any of those with me right now, so I'm not going to do that. But one thing I would like to point out that I'm sure you would like is here. We're going to take, if I can, oh, darn, I don't think I'm going to be able to. There we go. Now, for your sear, I know many people have had trouble with this before, with the sear. To get the sear out, it's a bit of a task, that is for sure. So here's your sear here. What can happen with this thing is either your spring wears out or the tooth gets dull. If I can. It's hard to see with the camera in the way, but yeah, the tooth here can get dull and it will round itself. If I can focus that. But yeah, that will round off, and what you can do to fix that is you can sand it and just basically resharpen the tooth so it catches better. And I've done that already a few times, so this I feel like this has reached, it's been pretty good so far. I've seen horror stories and of people who've snapped theirs in half, but I've been fortunate so far and I haven't had any issues. Now for reinstallation, that's the fun part. So for reinstallation, you have to be careful on how far you push it forward. because you have this right here, which actually it touches. So when you're taking it out, you have to snake it through that. And then, if I can get close, you can see it's right there right now. You got to push it in just a little bit so it clears it, and that's where you want it. You don't want to go any further. Just leave it there. So now that we're done with that part, we can snake it through. We can see our Sear is saying hello. Push that back in there and just line it up with the power tube. Just like that. One thing you want to make sure to do, I just forgot myself. Look at that. This is for the loading chamber. You have to pull this back out again. Thankfully it's not that hard for me. And you want to reattach it onto this teeth. If you could see, that has little teeth there. And you want to just basically make sure it catches on. And it stays on like that. Then reattach your power tube. And just like that, it'll keep in place. Yeah. Alright. Seems like our valve is coming to say hello again. Oh, see, so what could happen? It would just happen to me too just now. So, if you can look, I notice this happens for a lot of people. So when they take their marker apart and don't know what they're doing, they sometimes push their sear too far forward and it will get pushed behind here. You can see how it's stuck up there, so you basically want to push it back right there. If you can get a better angle. It's basically between this and this right here. I'm trying to point at it. Bad camera angle, I know. This right there. You want it between these two things, and that's the happy spot for it. Okay, so now that we're done with that, we can begin the reassembly of this marker. So, grab your screws. Make sure to grab the right screws. And I'm going to have to be right back to grab my Phillips that I just threw across the table a few minutes ago. So, one sec. Okay, we're back. Alright, I just had to grab the screwdriver. So anyways, so we reattach your screws. They go in the top thread, right there. You can get a better angle. You can see there's two holes. It goes in the top one. So just thread that back on. Pretty much attaches the marker to the body. Let's get this one back in there. Now you want to make sure not to tighten these too tight. They can strip easily, so just be gentle. That's back on. Now we grab our Allen screw, just push that through, and we tighten it back on. There we go. Make sure that's nice and tight. It doesn't need to be overly tight either, but just you want to have a nice good snug tightness. Alright, so now that it's back on, we can work with getting our shell back on also. So like I told you before, when you put this back on, make sure it's sitting over flush like that. So then you grab your shell. You run the pump arm through it. Well, this is going to be trouble because I have a rail on the top. Of course it's going to be trouble. Actually, let's try go. There. That wasn't so bad. So now that's back on, we can reattach the screws for the shell. Okay. Alright, that's back on. Just nice. Okay, now we can reattach our bolt. Grab our bolt spring. Push our bolt through. So keep in mind, so our bolt right now is trying to line up with the power tube. You don't want to force it in there either, because if you force it in, you have a chance of damaging your power tube or even your bolt. So don't force. There we go. There's a sweet spot. Okay. So as you can see now, our bolt's in there, and you can see the thread hole. So you would grab your Allen key and screw and reattach your, reattach your screw to your bolt. You want to make sure to keep pressure onto your bolt, because your bolt is under spring tension right now, and it will not sit still for you. So now that's back on, nice and snug. See, a lot easier with that. We can now work on attaching our pump handle. Now, for the pump handle, that's where it gets interesting. There's that spring. Okay. I was looking for this. These things are incredibly easy to lose, and they're a pain in the butt to install. I have the measurements of the spring that I'll leave in the description. Maybe you can find a spare one, but if this thing ever gets lost, there's still hope. To actually remedy not having the spring, because if you don't have the spring, what will happen is this will move freely and will drive you nuts while you run. So what I did instead is I bent the pump arm just slightly, just so when it goes in, it catches, and it doesn't allow for too much play. But I'm going to have to show you how to install it with the marker, which isn't a very fun thing to do, but here we go. So you want to go at an angle. You want to make sure the spring is on the pump arm, and you want to find that sweet spot where it goes straight, just like that. Now, let's make sure that let's hope that spring stayed in place. It doesn't sound like it did, though. Put our loading tube back on, just thread it back on like a normal barrel. Alright, now that it's back on, you want to grab your guide spring, simply reattach it. So what you do is you run it through here. That's why we took off the loading cap before. So now, when you put this loading tube on, you want to make sure the threads are lined up upwards, so it's lining up with that hole there, as you can see the cutout. Alright, so what we can do now is push that in. We want to line it up with the hole. Now that it's lined up, grab our screw and reattach. back on. You can now reattach your barrel. Alright, now that that's been reattached, we are done. Oh, in the end, actually no, we're not done. So then you got to reattach your iron sight. Let's thread this out more. Okay, it's good. Now it should. You gotta make sure that thing stays down, or else it won't want to go on. Hang on, I gotta thread this out more. There we go. Yeah, that little sucker even gave you some trouble. So that's back on there. So now we grab our loading tube cap and we thread it back on, but I don't have threads anymore, so I don't have to do that step. But initially, once you're done doing that, your marker has now been reassembled and disassembled, and hopefully this video helps you.